The game just destroyed everything he built in 72 hours. What he said about Kendrick has the entire internet turning on him. This whole situation is spiraling so fast that even his own fans are abandoning ship, and what happens next might end his career forever. Everybody thought they knew the story. The game made some wild claims about trying to sign Kendrick Lamar back in the day. People laughed it off as typical rapper exaggeration. That was the version everyone repeated online. But then Teez came through with receipts that completely destroyed his credibility. And instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, the game did something way more dangerous. He doubled down on everything. He went on Club Shay Shay and declared himself the best rapper on the entire West Coast. And now the whole narrative is twisting into something darker. This isn't just about one lie anymore. This is about a complete reputation collapse happening in real time, broadcast across every platform. Let me break down exactly how this all unfolded, because the timeline is absolutely insane. It started when The Game went on a podcast and casually dropped this bomb. He claimed that back when Kendrick was still an underground artist, he tried to sign him to his label. Said he saw the potential early, tried to make it sound like he was some kind of visionary talent scout. The internet immediately raised eyebrows because that story never came up before in nearly 2 decades of hip-hop history. And that's when Teez entered the chat. Teez, who actually worked closely with Kendrick during those early years, came through with a response that literally dismantled the entire claim. He didn't just say the game was lying. He provided context, dates, and specific details about how things actually went down. He explained the real timeline of Kendrick's come-up and where the game was during that period. And spoiler alert, the game was nowhere near those negotiations. TMZ picked up the story immediately. Social media went absolutely nuclear. Fans online turned into investigators, pulling up old interviews, checking dates, cross-referencing every public statement the game ever made about Kendrick. And guess what they found? Contradictions everywhere. In previous interviews from years ago, the game never once mentioned trying to sign Kendrick, not one time. If that was true, if he really tried to sign one of the greatest rappers of this generation, wouldn't he have bragged about it before? That's the kind of story rappers tell over and over, but he never did, until now, until Kendrick reached legendary status and couldn't be questioned anymore. Online detectives took this to a new level, digging into every detail like they're on some CSI mission. They started studying old blog posts, forum discussions from the early 2000s, even MySpace archives. They were looking for any trace of the game being connected to Kendrick's early career, and folks online swear they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. But here's where it gets even crazier. Instead of letting it die down, instead of saying, maybe I misremembered or maybe I was thinking of someone else, the game went on Club Shay Shay and made things exponentially worse. He sat down with Shannon Sharpe and said with a straight face that he is the best rapper on the entire West Coast. Not one of the best, not top 5, the best. The audacity of that statement while Kendrick Lamar exists is mind-blowing. Shannon Sharpe's face during that moment became an instant meme. You could see him trying to process what he just heard. And the internet absolutely erupted. Twitter threads dissecting that claim hit tens of thousands of retweets within hours. Reddit communities dedicated entire mega threads to breaking down why that statement was delusional. Fans started listing accomplishments. Kendrick has multiple Grammy Awards, including a Pulitzer Prize for music, the first non-classical, non-jazz artist to ever win that. He has albums considered generational classics. He has respect from every corner of hip-hop, from the streets to the academics. His Pop Out concert literally united the entire West Coast, and the game claims he's better. People aren't just disagreeing, they're genuinely confused about how someone could make that claim with a clear conscience. Commentary channels exploded with reaction videos. Every hip-hop podcast dedicated emergency episodes to this topic. The consensus was unanimous and brutal. This wasn't confidence, this was desperation disguised as ego. But wait, it gets worse, way worse. Just days after that interview, the game tried to explain why he didn't attend Kendrick's Pop Out. This was the massive Juneteenth event in Los Angeles that brought together basically every major West Coast artist, a historic moment for the culture. And the game was noticeably absent. When people started asking why, his first excuse was vague. Something about scheduling conflicts. Nobody really bought it, but it wasn't a huge deal. Artists miss events sometimes. But then he changed the story. He went on social media and claimed he stayed away because of gang politics, said he was trying to avoid an incident, said he didn't want his presence to cause problems. And that's when fans caught the massive, glaring contradiction that exposed everything. How can you declare yourself the king of Los Angeles, the best rapper in Compton, the greatest on the entire West Coast, and simultaneously be too afraid of gang politics to show up to a West Coast celebration? How does that math work? If you really run LA like you claim, wouldn't that event be exactly where you should be? Wouldn't your absence be more disrespectful than your presence? The internet destroyed him for that. Reddit threads called it the weakest excuse in hip-hop history. Twitter spaces were roasting him live for hours. TikTok creators made comedy skits about rappers claiming to be kings but hiding from functions. This is what desperation looks like when the narrative escapes your control. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking into place. This isn't random. This isn't just ego run wild. There's a pattern here. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, it all makes sense. The game has been dealing with serious relevance issues for a while now. Think about his career trajectory. He came into the game hot in the mid-2000s with The Documentary. That album was massive. Classic West Coast sound, Dr. Dre production, features from everyone who mattered. He was positioned as the next great West Coast voice. People genuinely believed he could carry the torch. But here's the thing about torches. You gotta keep the flame alive. And over the years, the game's flame started flickering. His albums still sold, sure, but the cultural impact diminished with each release. The conversations around his music became less about the artistry and more about the controversies, the beefs, the claims, the constant need to inject himself into every major hip-hop moment, whether he was invited or not. Meanwhile, Kendrick Lamar emerged from the same city and ascended to heights the game never reached. Kendrick didn't just become successful, he became important. His music sparked national conversations about race, politics, identity. His albums were dissected in college courses. He performed at the White House. He won a Pulitzer Prize. And the game watched all of this happen from the sidelines. That kind of proximity to greatness while feeling left behind creates a very specific type of frustration. They're both from Compton. They both rep the West Coast, but one became a global icon, and the other became known more for Instagram beef than musical legacy. Put all that together, and it looks like the perfect recipe for desperate attention-seeking behavior. But there's another layer to this that people aren't talking about enough. The game has spent years positioning himself as a historian of West Coast hip-hop. He constantly references the legends. He name-drops Pac and Biggie in almost every interview. He tries to connect himself to that lineage, to make himself seem like the rightful heir to that throne. The problem? The culture already chose the heir, and it wasn't him. Kendrick represents everything the game wanted to be, respected by the streets and the critics, commercially successful and artistically uncompromising, able to unite the West Coast under one banner without needing to beg for attention. And when Kendrick threw the Pop Out concert, when he brought out every major name from LA and created that historic moment, it sent a very clear message about who actually has influence in that city. The game's absence was loud, not because he chose not to go, but because his presence wasn't necessary. The West Coast celebrated itself without needing him there. That's gotta sting. So what does he do? He starts making claims that rewrite history, claims that position him as someone who discovered Kendrick, someone who was there at the beginning, someone whose vision helped shape the very artist who surpassed him. It's a psychological cope mechanism, honestly. If he can convince people that he saw Kendrick's greatness before anyone else, if he can attach himself to that legacy, then maybe he gets some of that shine. Maybe he stays relevant by proximity. But the incident isn't stupid. People saw through it immediately. And it gets worse for him because this isn't the first time he's done something like this. The game has a history of inserting himself into narratives that don't include him. He's claimed relationships with artists who barely know him. He's exaggerated his role in major moments. He's rewritten his own history so many times that people stop trusting anything he says. There's a term for this in psychology. It's called confabulation. When someone genuinely starts believing their false memories because they've repeated them so many times, the line between what actually happened and what they wish happened blurs completely. And that might be what we're witnessing here. The game has told himself these stories so many times, surrounded himself with yes men who never challenged him, that he might actually believe he tried to sign Kendrick. He might actually believe he's the best on the West Coast. He might actually believe gang politics kept him from the Pop Out, instead of the simpler truth, which is that he just wasn't that important to the event. This is what happens when ego meets irrelevance, when someone who used to matter desperately tries to reclaim a throne that was never really theirs to begin with. The culture has moved on. Hip-hop evolved, and the game is stuck in 2005, still trying to relive his peak while everyone else is focused on the future. That's the real tragedy here. Not that he lied, but that he felt he had to. But here's the part that really hits different when you think about it deeply. This isn't just about a rapper making wild claims for attention. This is about watching someone's legacy crumble in real time. And not because of outside forces, not because the industry turned on him, but because he's actively destroying it himself with every word he speaks. Think about the fans who supported the game for 2 decades, the people who bought the documentary when it dropped, who defended him through every beef, who showed up to concerts, who genuinely believed in his music. They're watching this happen and feeling betrayed. Scroll through the comments under his recent posts. You'll see longtime fans expressing genuine disappointment, not hate, disappointment. There's a difference. These aren't casual observers roasting him for entertainment. These are people who feel let down by someone they respected. One comment that went viral said it perfectly. "I defended this man through everything, every beef, every controversy, every questionable decision, but I can't defend lying. I can't defend disrespecting Kendrick. I can't defend this desperation. It's too much." That comment had over 40,000 likes, 40,000 people who felt the exact same way. And here's what makes it even sadder. The game doesn't have to do this. He has a genuine legacy. The documentary is still considered a classic by most hip-hop heads. He has hits that defined an era. He has respect from his peers for his pen game. He could have aged gracefully, accepted his place in history, and been celebrated as a West Coast legend. But instead, he chose this path. The constant controversy, the never-ending need to be in the conversation, even if it means lying or contradicting himself or disrespecting people who are objectively more accomplished. It's like watching someone with a beautiful house slowly tear it down brick by brick because they're jealous of their neighbor's mansion. Nobody forced him to do this. He made these choices himself. And the saddest part, Kendrick hasn't said a single word. Kendrick doesn't need to respond because the game is destroying himself more effectively than any diss track ever could. Kendrick's silence is louder than any response he could give. That silence says everything. It says, "You're not worth my energy." It says, "The culture already knows the truth." It says, "I don't need to defend my legacy against you because my work speaks for itself." And the game is left screaming into the void, making bigger and bigger claims, hoping something will make people pay attention, hoping something will make him feel like he matters again. But with every claim, he matters less. With every contradiction, people take him less seriously. With every desperate attempt to stay relevant, he proves exactly how irrelevant he's become. This isn't entertainment anymore. It's genuinely sad to watch. A cautionary tale about what happens when you can't accept where you are and can't stop chasing where you used to be.
Let's dive deeper into the specific contradictions because they're piling up fast and each one makes the situation worse. After the initial backlash from the Kendrick signing claim, fans started doing something interesting. They began cataloging every statement the game ever made about Kendrick over the years, and what they found was a fascinating pattern of revisionist history. In a 2012 interview, back when Kendrick was just starting to break through with Section 80, the game was asked about up-and-coming West Coast artists. He mentioned several names. Kendrick wasn't one of them. He acknowledged Kendrick existed, but there was zero indication of any deep connection or business relationship. Fast forward to 2015. Good Kid, Mad City had already gone platinum. Kendrick was undeniably a star. The Game did an interview where he praised Kendrick's success and called him the future. Still no mention of trying to sign him. No mention of being involved in his early career. Jump to 2017. Damn had just dropped. Kendrick was dominating the charts and the conversation. The Game posted on Instagram congratulating him, called him a king, said Compton was proud. Again, nothing about their supposed business history. So why now? Why did this story suddenly emerge in 2024 after Kendrick reached untouchable status? The answer is obvious when you think about it. It's easier to claim a connection to someone when they're so big that contradicting you seems petty. The Game calculated that Kendrick wouldn't respond because it's beneath him, and he was right. Kendrick didn't respond, but Teez did, and the fans did, and now the Game is dealing with something worse than a Kendrick response. He's dealing with complete loss of credibility. But let's talk about the Club Shay Shay interview specifically, because that appearance revealed even more problems. Shannon Sharpe, to his credit, pushed back gently on some of the Game's claims. When the Game said he was the best rapper on the West Coast, Shannon brought up Kendrick's Pulitzer Prize. The Game's response? He said awards don't determine who's the best. He said it's about bars, pen game, and authenticity. Okay, fair arguments, subjective art and all that. But then Shannon asked him about commercial success, album sales, cultural impact. The Game pivoted again, said those metrics don't matter either, said real ones know who really got the crown. So, according to the Game's own logic, awards don't matter, sales don't matter, cultural impact doesn't matter, and critical acclaim doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is his personal opinion of himself. That's not confidence, that's delusion wrapped in false bravado. And fans caught that immediately. Reddit threads broke down his circular logic, how he dismisses every objective measure of success because he doesn't win by those measures, how he redefines greatness to fit only himself. But here's where the interview got really revealing. Shannon asked him about the Pop Out concert, asked why he wasn't there if he's the king of LA, and the Game's body language completely changed. He got defensive, started stumbling over his words. The confidence from earlier in the interview vanished. He gave that gang politics excuse, but Shannon's face showed he didn't buy it. There was this long pause where you could see Shannon trying to figure out how to respond without making it awkward. He eventually just moved on to the next question. That moment became one of the most replayed clips from the entire interview. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't said. The uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. Now let's talk about the social media reaction, because it's been merciless. Twitter created a hashtag that started trending within hours of the interview. It wasn't even a hate hashtag. It was just people genuinely confused about the Game's claims. Thousands of tweets asking the same question. Is he serious right now? TikTok creators made compilation videos of rappers listing their accomplishments versus the Game listing his. The contrast was devastating. One video showing Kendrick's awards, impact, and legacy next to the Game's controversies and beefs hit over 5 million views in 2 days. Instagram comment sections under the Game's posts became war zones. Even his own fans were begging him to stop. Bro, we love you, but please stop talking. You're making it worse. Just take the L and move on. And YouTube hip-hop channels, they had an absolute field day. Every major commentary channel dropped videos breaking down the situation. The collective view count across all those videos is probably approaching 10 million by now. This story has legs because it keeps getting worse. The Game tried to control the narrative by posting more on social media, but every post just added fuel to the fire. He posted a photo with a caption about being the king of Compton. The comments roasted him. He posted a video of himself freestyling to prove his skill. People said the bars were basic. He posted screenshots of texts from other rappers supposedly supporting him. Fans questioned if those were even real. Nothing is working. Every move he makes to defend himself creates more ammunition for critics. It's like watching someone in quicksand. The more they struggle, the deeper they sink. And through all of this, Kendrick remains completely silent. No response, no acknowledgement, nothing. And somehow that silence is more devastating than anything he could possibly say.
Now, this whole situation gets even crazier when you realize the game is simultaneously opening multiple fronts in what's becoming a war he absolutely cannot win. It's not just Kendrick. He's also been taking subliminal shots at other major artists. In that same Club Shay Shay interview, he mentioned Eminem. Didn't quite challenge him directly, but definitely implied he could compete. The Eminem fan base, which is arguably the most defensive fan base in hip-hop, immediately started circulating old clips of M washing Game on features. There's this classic moment from years ago where Eminem and the Game were on a track together. Eminem's verse was so technically superior that even Game admitted in interviews back then that he got bodied. But now he wants to act like that never happened? Like he's suddenly on that level? The internet doesn't forget. Those clips resurfaced with millions of views, comments saying things like he really forgot M destroyed him on his own album. The collective memory of hip-hop fans is undefeated. Then there's the J. Cole situation. The Game randomly mentioned Cole in a post, saying something about how he's overrated. This came completely out of nowhere. Cole wasn't involved in any of this drama, wasn't talking about the Game, was literally just minding his business and making music. Why would the Game do that? Simple. He's trying to create multiple conflicts, hoping one of them generates the response he wants. He's fishing for relevance by attaching his name to bigger artists. It's transparent and desperate, and everyone sees right through it. But here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. The Game is exhibiting classic behavior of someone experiencing what's called an extinction burst. In psychology, that's when someone engages in increasingly extreme behavior when their usual tactics stop working. Like a child throwing a bigger tantrum when the small tantrum doesn't get them what they want. The Game's usual method of staying relevant was controlled controversy, calculated beefs, strategic callouts. But that playbook stopped working because the culture evolved. People got tired of manufactured drama. They want substance. So now he's escalating, making bigger claims, starting more conflicts, contradicting himself more obviously, because his brain is essentially panicking, trying anything to recreate the attention he used to get naturally. Industry insiders have been whispering about this privately for months apparently. There were rumors that his team tried to stage an intervention of sorts, advised him to take a step back, focus on music, let his work speak for itself. But he reportedly refused, said he knows what he's doing, said the internet always comes around eventually. But the internet isn't coming around this time. The consensus is too strong. The evidence is too clear. The contradictions are too blatant. Meanwhile, let's talk about what other West Coast artists are doing during all this, because their silence is also very telling. Nobody is defending the Game publicly. Not one major West Coast artist has come out to support his claims or co-sign his King of LA narrative. That tells you everything you need to know about how he's perceived by his actual peers. Compare that to when Kendrick threw the Pop Out. Every major name showed up or showed support. Even artists who had past beef with each other unified for that moment, because Kendrick has the respect and influence to make that happen. He's genuinely seen as a unifying figure. The Game couldn't create that moment if he tried, not because he's not talented, but because he burned too many bridges, told too many lies, and exhausted too much goodwill over the years. There's a lesson in that. Talent alone isn't enough to build lasting legacy. You need authenticity. You need consistency. You need people to trust your word. The Game has none of those things anymore because he traded them all for temporary attention. And now he's dealing with the consequences, watching his reputation crumble while the artist he's trying to position himself above continued thriving without even acknowledging his existence. That's gotta be the worst feeling, being ignored by the people you're desperately trying to compete with, screaming for recognition from people who don't even consider you a factor. What we're seeing here is something way bigger than just one rapper having a bad week. This is a masterclass in how not to manage a legacy in the social media age, and there are genuine lessons here for anyone with a platform. First, understand that the internet has a permanent memory. Everything you say, every claim you make, every contradiction you create, it's all documented forever. People will dig up receipts from a decade ago to prove you wrong. There's no getting away with revisionist history anymore. The game apparently didn't get that memo. He operated like he was still in the 2000s, when you could say something in an interview and it would just fade away unless someone happened to keep that magazine. But now, everything lives online permanently. Searchable, shareable, provable. Second, authenticity is currency now more than ever. Audiences are sophisticated. They can smell desperation and fakeness from a mile away. The moment you start contradicting yourself or making claims that don't add up, you lose credibility. And credibility is almost impossible to rebuild once it's gone. The game traded his credibility for attention. Short-term viral moments in exchange for long-term respect. That's a terrible deal, and he's realizing it now. Third, silence is sometimes the most powerful response. Kendrick proved that. Instead of getting dragged into a back and forth, instead of dignifying the claims with a response, he just didn't engage. And his silence spoke louder than any diss track could. It positioned him as above the drama while the game looked increasingly desperate. There's wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to let your work speak for you. The game clearly hasn't learned that lesson. Fourth, you can't bully your way into legacy status. You can't force people to respect you through controversy and volume. Legacy is earned through consistent quality, authentic connection, and cultural impact over time. The game is trying to shortcut that process by making bold claims, and it's backfiring spectacularly. And finally, there's a broader conversation here about how we treat aging artists. Hip-hop has always been a young person's game. The culture constantly moves forward, embracing new sounds and new voices. But that doesn't mean older artists can't remain relevant. They just have to evolve. Look at Jay-Z, look at Nas, look at even Snoop Dogg. They remained relevant by adapting, by finding new lanes, by accepting their elder statesman roles and thriving in them. They didn't need to claim they're better than the new generation. They let their legacy speak and built new value in other ways. The game could have done that. He could have been a respected veteran, a mentor figure, someone who uplifts the next generation while maintaining his own dignity. Instead, he chose competition with artists he can't realistically compete with. And now he's losing battles he never needed to fight. This story is still unfolding with way bigger implications than just one person's reputation. It's a case study in ego, desperation, and what happens when you can't accept change. Every artist watching this is taking notes. Every up-and-coming rapper is seeing what not to do when your time in the spotlight fades. The culture doesn't forget these moments. This will be referenced for years whenever someone wants an example of career self-sabotage.
So where does this go from here? Because right now we're watching something unprecedented, a real-time reputation collapse that's accelerating instead of slowing down. The most likely scenario is that the game continues doubling down. That seems to be his pattern. When confronted with criticism, he doesn't reflect or adjust, he amplifies. Expect more interviews, more social media posts, more attempts to rewrite the narrative, each one creating more contradictions, more material for critics, more damage to his legacy. There's a small chance he takes accountability, admits he exaggerated, apologizes for disrespecting Kendrick and the culture, but honestly, that seems unlikely based on his history. Pride is a hell of a drug, and he's been high on it for 2 decades. The nuclear option, the thing that could truly end this entire saga, is if Kendrick breaks his silence. If he addresses this directly, whether through a verse, an interview, or even just a social media post, that would be absolutely devastating for the game. Kendrick destroyed Drake with surgical precision earlier this year, methodically dismantled his entire image with carefully crafted bars backed by receipts. Now imagine what he could do to someone who's already crumbling, someone who's given him mountains of contradictory material to work with. But will Kendrick respond? Probably not. He doesn't need to. The culture is doing the work for him. The game is destroying himself more effectively than any diss track ever could. Another fascinating angle is how this affects the game's career moving forward. Will artists still want to work with him? Will promoters book him for shows? Will labels want to sign him? Credibility matters in this industry, and he's running dangerously low. There's precedent for rappers recovering from controversy, but those recoveries usually involve genuine talent reasserting itself or authentic apologies that resonate with fans. The game hasn't shown he's capable of either right now. Some people are speculating this is all calculated, that he's purposely creating controversy to drum up interest for a new project. If that's the strategy, it's backfiring, because the attention isn't "I can't wait to hear his new album" attention, it's "I can't believe he's still talking" attention. That doesn't translate to streams or sales. Others think there's something deeper going on. Mental health struggles, perhaps. Midlife crisis playing out publicly. Genuine delusion from years of yes men and isolation. Whatever the root cause, the result is the same, a painful collapse of someone who used to matter in hip-hop. The saddest possibility is that this is just who he is now. The controversy-seeking, credit-claiming, constantly contradicting version of himself has become his permanent state, and hip-hop will eventually just forget about him. Not with some dramatic ending, just with gradual irrelevance until he's a footnote in West Coast history. The three questions that will determine everything remain unanswered. Will Kendrick respond? Is the game creating enemies he can't control who might unite against him? And who actually benefits from this chaos? Because right now, it's definitely not the game. The clock is ticking. The internet is watching. Every word he speaks digs the hole deeper. And at some point, that hole becomes impossible to climb out of.
Look, this story is far from over. More details are dropping every single day. More contradictions are surfacing, more fans are turning on him. Reports are saying the game's team is scrambling behind the scenes, trying to contain the damage, but every move they make seems to backfire worse than the last. This is one of those situations where you genuinely don't know what's coming next. Will he finally back down? Will he make an even wilder claim? Will Kendrick break his silence with something absolutely lethal? Or will this just slowly fade as hip-hop moves on to the next story, leaving the game behind permanently? Whatever happens, this moment will be remembered. This is career-defining stuff, and not in a good way. Years from now, when people talk about the game's legacy, this will be the story they reference. The time he tried to claim credit for Kendrick, called himself king of the West Coast, and got systematically dismantled by the entire culture. So let me ask you, where do you stand on all this? Do you think the game actually believes what he's saying, or is this just desperate attention-seeking? Do you think Kendrick should respond, or is his silence the perfect move? And honestly, can the game ever recover from this, or is his legacy permanently damaged? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because I'm reading every single one. This community has the best discussions, and I want to know what y'all think about this absolute chaos. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. This was a long one, but this story needed the deep dive. There's too many layers to rush through it. Make sure you hit that like button because it genuinely helps the channel. Algorithms love engagement, and your support means everything. Subscribe if you haven't already because we're covering every single development in this story as it happens. More information is coming out daily, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Turn on post notifications too, that little bell icon, so you get alerted the moment I drop the next video. Because trust me, the next chapter in this saga is going to be absolutely insane. I appreciate every single one of you for being here, for watching, engaging, and being part of this community. Stay safe out there, stay informed, and remember, in the social media age, your words live forever. Choose them carefully. I'll see you in the next one.